Hi dear, hello everyone. Welcome to channel that shares knowledge about comprehensive personal development through good books. This week, I would like to share with you a content called Understanding the Three Egos in You, through the book The Ego and the ID. The Vietnamese translation of the title is The Ego and the ID. Originally published in 1920, this is also the pinnacle work of psychologist Sigmund Freud. He is the father of psychoanalysis, also known as one of the three Jews who changed modern thought. Freud said that man's understanding of consciousness is only the tip of the subconscious iceberg. Deep below the surface of the sea is what really matters and affects our psychology and emotions. Today's classic psychology book will show you that you have three selves in you: the ID, ego, and superego. The ID means the ego and the superego, or also known as the ego and superego instincts. This is also the important model of the mind of the psychoanalytic school of thought. The relationship between the ego and the superego can be illustrated by a famous picture of a carriage carrying passengers. The horse with the reins is human instinct. Riding in the middle is the ego, and the passenger gesticulating behind is the superego. Instinct represents desire. When it is instinct, you will follow the pleasure principle of interest to act and express yourself. The most unconscious function of the human being is the ego, which represents reason. When the ego in you takes over, it will try to change the principles of interest into practical principles that will help you take responsibility for solving the tasks in your life. The superego represents the moral guide. It provides the goal of evaluating various actions of the self and is also the ego that everyone most desires to become. The reason why many people often feel miserable, in a context of people who are confused and have difficulty in everything they do in life, is because they do not know how to handle the relationship between the three egos in themselves well. So today, let's embark on a journey to find out about the three egos: the instinctive ego, the ego, and the superego, so that we can understand more clearly about the person inside us. Please listen to today's shared content. Feeling inferior is due to the ego and the superego being in tension with each other. Have you ever felt like this? In fact, you are a person with your own strengths and highlights. You have done very well in many things, but you always feel that you are not as good as others. Although you are clearly very dedicated to your work, when you encounter some obstacles, you protest that you can't do anything well. You are clearly friendly, but when you have conflicts with others, you always think that I am not okay and I do not deserve to be loved. If you have thought many times in your life that I am not trying hard enough, not good enough, not excellent enough, not confident enough, then you can think about a well-known conclusion by the author. When something in the ego is in line with the superego, people will feel happy, but if it is in contrast, it will create feelings of inferiority or guilt. These are people who often have the habit of denying themselves. The reason is because in their minds, they always strongly idealize their own superego. For them, the superego is a beautiful, perfect ego that everyone admires, never fails, and can do everything well. However, the more the superego is worshipped and the more it expects perfection, the more the ego hates itself. As explained in the book The Courage to be Disliked, a man only 1.55 m tall, when going to work or traveling, always felt like someone was pointing at his back. This made him feel especially uncomfortable, and then he was upset and confided with friends, "If only I could be 20 centimeters taller, or even just 10 centimeters, then I would definitely have a happier life." But then his friend said that the people he thought were criticizing behind his back weren't talking about his height. Actually, they were saying that he is a gentle, learned, understanding person with a great personality. The wise man suddenly realized that what made him feel uncomfortable and inferior was himself and no one else. The feeling of inferiority came from his ego, which was daydreaming. He wanted to become an ideal superego with a more handsome and noble appearance, which is why he unconsciously hated himself. If you are more self-conscious and crave to become more ideal in appearance, especially in the context of education or career, the gap between the ego and the superego will become increasingly serious. When this balance is lost, you will never be able to live as yourself. A writer once said that people in general will have about 10 advantages. If you don't have all 10 advantages, there will be at least 3 to 4 advantages. In this world, everyone has strengths and weaknesses. Blindly looking down on yourself will only imprison yourself in the narrow cage of your ego, and you will miss out on opportunities for growth and transformation. In the book The Psychology of the Meaning of Life, what Adler wrote about inferiority and superiority also says that the inferiority complex in most people is born from comparing particular physical and appearance defects that will make a person feel inferior. I feel that this type of stress and inferiority complex is also caused by comparison and is very difficult to cure. In fact, I have had a humpback and have had difficulty moving since I was a child. I feel small and ugly, so I often felt self-conscious. But then, he decided to become a doctor and shifted his focus from his physical flaws to his strengths. This helped him overcome his inferiority complex and achieve extraordinary success. In essence, to constantly compare with others, we need to understand that it is all because your ego is craving to achieve a super-perfect self. Let go of the expectation of perfection of this perfect self, and accept your true self. The more you desire and dream of the things you don't have, the more you will lack and feel inferior. Only when you learn to love all of your present self, love both the good and the bad, you can stimulate your true potential. Falling into anxiety is due to the superego demanding too much of the ego. The origin of anxiety in people is due to the over-exaggeration of self. In this book, Freud shows us that the root cause behind anxiety lies in the excessive demands of the superego in you. It is found that some people have low demands on the superego, so the ego can easily coordinate the relationship between the ID and the superego. If all three live together in peace, people will not have anxiety or restlessness. But some people have a superego in them that always demands very much, while the ability to control the ego is limited. It cannot overcome the obstacles of instinct. At this time, all three are struggling together. People will feel anxious and depressed inside. In other words, once you set too high requirements for yourself and do not allow yourself to make mistakes, then anxiety will come from that. If left unchecked, it will spread like poison until it takes over your entire mind and destroys your life. Social psychologist, Schom, through a study, has discovered it turns out that there are two types of people. The first type of person is the one who always likes to look for all possible options to choose the best option. This type of person is called the person who chooses the best. The second type of person is the person who just needs to find a moderate option that makes them feel satisfied. They are called satisficers. The first type of person will take longer to choose, and their choices will look much more perfect than the second type, the choice of easily pleased people. However, sadly, no matter how perfect the choice is, they may still be unhappy with their decision. What is even sadder is that, looking at the overall picture, compared to easily pleased people, people who choose the best are often less happy, more pessimistic, have lower self-esteem, and have lower life satisfaction. They are also more likely to regret, blame themselves, and fall into depression. A large number of psychological studies have confirmed that a person with high psychological demands will lead to anxiety, depression, and reduce the quality of life. You may think that the superego, having high demands on the ego, will help you improve yourself, but in a study, Alan Langter, a positive psychologist at Harvard University, explored the impact of openness to mistakes through an experiment. He randomly assigned the participants into 3 groups and asked them to speak. Those in Group A believed that one must prepare as best as possible and that mistakes were not allowed. These were also perfectionists. Those in Group B believed that they think that mistakes are inevitable. These are people with a self-forgiving mentality, while Group C people think that a speech can have one or more unexpected mistakes. These are people with curiosity and a relaxed approach. The results are that people in Group C feel the most comfortable, are the least nervous during presentations, and generally receive the highest ratings from the audience. This happens because these people have appropriately downplayed the demands of the superego. Instead, they just focus on their own experiences. So, don't be afraid to make mistakes. Making mistakes is not something we should avoid. Once mistakes happen, we should not just use comfort to soothe ourselves. To solve the problem of making mistakes, it can be encouraged and celebrated. It can even lead to better performance. Try to remember if you have ever made mistakes fluently as a baby. When you were a baby learning to talk, you know how many times you said things that didn't make any sense. But did you worry? We didn't worry. On the contrary, we gradually learned everything in a fun way. Then now, try to remember when you first developed an aversion to making mistakes, to the point of always demanding too much of yourself and becoming afraid of getting lost. When is it time to allow yourself to stop and not be so hard on yourself? Let the three egos in you live in peace, then anxiety can be released, and progress can be made. The Real Walk is not about worrying and demanding of yourself, but about carrying self-acceptance on the journey of experiencing the joy of progress. The walk cannot escape the past because the ego cannot accept instinct. Freud discovered a phenomenon from his two children. When the mother left, the child would continuously throw toys out of the crib, then fumble to pick them up. The child's purpose was to avoid the helplessness of the self, and a little bit of abandonment sadness caused by separation. The author calls this phenomenon repetition compulsion. When a person is not ready to accept the weakness of the instinctive ego, that person will not be able to get out of the past. I knew a friend who, when she was young, because her parents were busy working far away, was often sent to other people's houses. Some days she stayed at her relative's house, some days at her neighbor's house. The fear of the strange surroundings and the strong feeling of abandonment made her gradually lose the will to express her true feelings. So when she grows up, she often has difficulty in intimate relationships. She rarely asks for help from the other person, and only speaks up when she has resolved all the relationship issues. Her relationships didn't last long because the other party felt she was too distant. It was obvious that she really wanted an intimate relationship, but she was worried that she would be abandoned again. So, in her subconscious, she chose to isolate herself. This is a manifestation of not accepting the weak instinctive ego. When you are hurt, the sadness and despair that come from instinct will be like bruises in your subconscious mind. No matter how hard you try to avoid, deny, or defend, they still keep pushing you into pain again and again. The only way we can get out of it is to face honestly the feeling of the ego instinct. A person goes through suffering, but if you do not feel the pain, experience the pain, and reconcile with yourself, then the pain will never be released. The reason you cannot live the life you want is because the ego is doubting the superego. The book Crowd Psychology by French psychologist Gustave Le Bon is a book that had a profound influence on Freud. In this book, he gives the theory on the collective unconscious. What is the collective unconscious? When water is still water, it can be rainwater, river water, or seawater, but when mixed with other water, it is just a molecule of river water or a molecule of seawater. Similarly, we are just an isolated individual. We each maintain relatively different personal traits. Some people have warm personalities, while others have aloof temperaments. When integrated into a group, our individual personality is often drowned out by the group. Our thinking will be replaced by group thinking. When faced with a group of people, more or less, we will restrain our expressions and suppress our emotions. I bought something I liked and wanted to post it on social media to express my joy, but I was afraid that others would laugh at me for showing off, so I decided to delete it. During the meeting, I disagree with my colleague's opinion. I want to express my opinion, but I'm afraid that others will think I'm deliberately being uncooperative, so I choose to stay silent. And you will see that in life, there will be many other similar cases. Freud pointed out that the reason for such behavior is that when an individual exists alone and separates from the group, he or she will feel that he or she is not perfect. So, people will gradually give up the ideal self, that is, the superego of themselves, and move to the ideal group whose leader symbolizes the world. The world is always crowded and bustling. People cannot live without results. Because we are overwhelmed by the noise of the outside world and swayed by the opinions of others, it is inevitable that the measure of maturity in a person is not to conform to the standards of others, but always follow their own path. Have you ever come across people who sing badly but still volunteer to sing? There are people who don't speak well but really like to speak. At this time, do you think these people really like VO Trung? If you think like that, it means you have unconsciously followed the crowd mentality that only when you are really good, really perfect, will you dare to stand out. Show yourself. Otherwise, you will be laughed at. You long to be someone who stands out from the crowd. There is a true story like this. One person loved to play the guitar and wanted to perform in front of everyone at a party in England. He mustered up the courage to go on stage, But because he had just started practicing, he was not yet proficient. Some people suggested that he should go home and practice more, while others ridiculed him for making a fuss. However, he was not interrupted by the gossip and determined to finish his performance. Then, he sincerely told everyone, "I know I don't play very well, but no matter how people judge me, I will really enjoy this process of playing." Other people's expectations will always sway our own desires. But how to let other people's judgments not affect yourself? There is a saying like that: this voice from the outside world is for reference only. If you are not happy, then do not refer to it. We come to this world not to seek the approval of others but to do what we like, to live a life that you desire. But that is not to let you disregard everything and let everyone around you do whatever they want, but it requires you to have a correct perception of yourself when standing in the middle of a group. Don't look up to any external ideal. No matter how hard you try, you can't please everyone. Instead of worrying about the gains and losses in the judgment of those around you, better you should focus on your inner desires and try to live according to your own ideal path. As the author said, the root of human suffering lies in the incompatibility between subjective desires and objective reality. Objectively, we always like to exaggerate the difficulty of objective reality, thinking that all pain comes from the ups and downs of life and the misfortune of circumstances. But in reality, when we know that we have reached the three egos, you will understand which ego is taking over and causing an imbalance in your inner self. It is your own subjective desires that play a decisive role in your destiny. Don't indulge in your instinctual desires. Don't push yourself and your ego's expectations or fears of being judged by others. Don't get sidetracked by the superego's excessive demands for perfection. When you are calm, peaceful, and rational enough, you will be able to build a solid inner world like a pyramid, to be strong and steady on the path of your own destiny. Thank you for listening. If you feel this video is useful, please share it with those who need it. Give me a like button, click the subscribe button, and turn on the notification bell to watch the latest videos every week. Thank you, and see you in the next videos.